Hello and welcome back to another episode of Endurance Insights with myself, Coach Mark Cullen, coach to a number of competitive to professional triathletes, runners, CrossFit athletes, and I hop on here every week just to talk about what I'm seeing out there in terms of different endurance topics to either debunk some of the bad information that's out there or just things that I see my athletes struggling with or things I get a lot of questions on. So, this week, we're going to hit on a hot topic over the last couple of years, and that is going to be the effectiveness of zone two training of building your fitness. I'm a big proponent. Zone two is an awesome zone, but it's only a small piece of the performance puzzle if you're actually looking to improve. So I think where people get lost a lot of times on this is they see, especially like really high volume athletes doing tons of this zone two stuff, but they need to remember there's always a time and a place for maybe only zone two, and it's usually pretty short periods because you're just going to be missing out on so many other fitness gains if you do hit on the other zones during this time. And they all have a time and a place, but to only do zone two for really, really extended periods of time probably is going to hit a ceiling pretty quickly. So I know a lot of people do a lot of this zone two stuff because they think it's like amazing at fat burning. And there is something to be said in terms of that fat max zone just before your first threshold, your aerobic threshold, where fat burning is at its highest capacity there. But in terms of the whole puzzle of like body composition and fat burning and stuff like that, hitting on zone 3, 4, 5, and hitting all of these pieces is probably going to get you to the best body composition for performance anyways in the end. And just remember, I'm always talking from the lens of performance here. I'm not as much like a body comp specialist or somebody who's going to work with people who are after body comp things. There's obviously athletes I work with where we need to make some body comp pieces and changes certain times of year, but usually not my focus as a performance endurance coach. The other one where people are always doing zone two is they think they can just do only zone two and get this huge fitness boost. And while that is true a lot of times for like early stage athletes who haven't done any endurance programming in that first 8 to 12 weeks, they can see big jumps in their aerobic fitness, even in both their thresholds. So their LT1, their LT2, and also their VO2 max just from like improving and getting that snowball rolling on the endurance side of things. But usually that's where in an early phase, I'm sort of transitioning out of that and introducing more sort of intensity side pieces is after that 8 to 12 weeks where you're going to hit a pretty quick ceiling on that. There is a few scenarios where doing only zone two might make sense. And those are usually going to be like I just mentioned, somebody very new to running or coming back off an injury or coming back off time off. This is especially for running because it is a high impact sport and easy to get yourself injured if you ramp too quickly from both the mileage and intensity perspective. So running, especially, I'm very conservative with people in that early phase, and it might be 6 to 12 weeks of sort of that aerobic zone two type of running during that part before we progress. Another spot where zone two training only might make sense is maybe if you're trying to do like a huge volume jump or a training camp where if you were doing like 50% more of your usual volume, maybe a combination of biking and running, but probably mostly sort of biking and swimming, which are lower impact that you might be doing in a training camp because you took a week off work and you went somewhere. You may keep it mostly sort of aerobic during that time, just because if you were doing a bunch of intensity stuff in there too and introducing a lot more volume, you'd probably just dig yourself a deep fatigue hole, especially if you're not used to some of that versus an elite athlete might be able to get away with more of that because they're used to some of this higher volume and know how to track it and dig out of these fatigue holes, and they're kings and queens of recovery, so they know how to eat a ton of calories and sleep lots to actually absorb that stuff. Some other spots where it might make sense is maybe a transition phase, so again coming back off of a big race and some time off, or just between two sort of blocks where we need to take sort of a mental and physical reset. And then the final one I just think is like a high stress phase of life. If you have an insane time where maybe you've just had a baby or you have a bunch of stress at work, like these are times where maybe just giving this as an outlet to allow you to maybe have some time to yourself and express yourself in a different way outside of work and family is great. But if you're piling more intensity on there, you might just be digging a deeper fatigue hole. But what I mostly wanted to talk about today was why only doing zone two misses the puzzle, misses so many pieces of the puzzle for people. So just to define sort of zone two, usually that is up to our first sort of threshold, which is known as our LT1 or VT1 or aerobic threshold. In the 5 zone model, that's going to be like we're talking about zone two, and then across that LT1 is usually where we go into zone three. If you use some of the simplified 3 zone models, this would be zone one. So everything below the LT1 spot. I like to use the 5 zone model because there is some intricacies between below that first threshold being a zone one, which is more recovery, zone two, more aerobic, where you're actually kind of doing a little bit of work, but doesn't beat you down. You can do this for a long time. And then zone 3 and 4 are some important differences in there as well. So I like to use the 5 zone model. And then during this zone two stuff, primarily type 1 fiber recruitment, a great one for fat oxidation, like we talked about, improving aerobic efficiency. You can do lots of volume here and recover from it. And then like obviously some great physiological benefits from like the helping you get more mitochondria, make your mitochondria better functioning and bigger. So that biogenesis, and then lots of other great benefits across the physiological side of things. You can use heart rate for stuff like this. I find just caution to people, especially if you're trying to set a zone two pace or heart rate, and you're using some of these like Garmin sort of ones that are doing it either based off your age or a max heart rate it's come up with. A lot of times you'll have sort of the wrong information for some of this stuff. And same with pace. If you're trying to do it off of some of the stock, just putting in a race result, it can get a little dicey. I like to talk to people more of keeping things like a 4 to 5 out of 10 when they're doing Z2 stuff, maybe more like a 3 if they're going on the low end of zone 2 stuff. So I think it's really a feel, and that heart rate and pace can really change depending on the day. So I would say my Z2, what feels like maybe my mid to upper Z2 pace, changes a bunch depending on how fatigued I'm coming into it. And yeah, just where I'm at in the training block. So I really like people to get a good sense of what that feels like. This easy aerobic running, and then how it really changes when you go over that zone two and you start to have a little more labored breathing and takes a lot more focus, where zone two you can really find a lot more of a flow in there. Like we talked about, great benefits of zone two in terms of some of those early stage pieces, but especially as you're getting into it, the gains diminish really quickly. And if you're only doing zone two stuff, chances are your entire ceiling is going to start to fall down on you in terms of if you don't do any of that VO2 max work or threshold work, things like that. It's just eventually you're not going to be able to push that LT1 up because you're going to hit a ceiling above that. So I think it's important to remember that it's only a small piece of the puzzle. So we do want to, and there's lots of research out there that in terms of like improving all this aerobic efficiency, this fat oxidation, stuff like that, zone 3, 4, and 5 are just as good at improving this stuff. It's just, we have to do a fair amount of zone 2 stuff, especially at higher volume, because you can't recover from as much zone 3, 4, 5 stuff if you're trying to do that in the week, or we would just be doing only that stuff and becoming fitness freaks out of this. So, you see a lot of that stuff. There's a reason why top athletes, like you think of the Norwegians, they're doing a lot of that sort of threshold work. So it could be double threshold days where twice a week they're doing in the morning a threshold workout that might be like 6 by 5 minutes in that upper zone 4 sort of spot. So like a 7, 8 out of 10, comfortably uncomfortable, but repeatable. And then they're coming back in the evening and doing another like 10 by 3 minutes. So they're getting 60 minutes of threshold in one day. And then they're doing that again, maybe 2 days later. Same with a lot of the elite marathoners and stuff like that. They might be doing like 80, 85, 90% easy running, but like even that zone 2, call it easy running, they're doing is still at a very fast pace because they have such high LT1s as a percentage of their LT2 and VO2 max. But then they're sprinkling in tons of that threshold VO2 works in specific blocks to allow them to push that ceiling up and then bring everything in behind it. So remember, all the time we're trying to build the biggest pyramid or triangle possible. And if you do just zone 2 work, you might build this really strong base, but it might be this very wide base with not a very strong top on it. Or a very tall top on it, I guess is a better way to describe it. And then the opposite is like a lot of elite CrossFit athletes that come to me, or people who were power sport athletes. When they come to me, they actually have the opposite of that. And they have these very tall triangles, amazing VO2 anaerobic capacity, but their base is what's lacking in there, like sort of their middle to bottom part there. So that's where a lot of them, I'm getting them to do more of that zone 2, 3, 4 work so we can build the biggest pyramid possible. But yeah, if you're only doing zone 2, you're going to build a great base, but there's going to be nowhere for that sort of base to go in terms of height after that, because you haven't done any of that zone 2, 3, 4 work. So, yeah, to that, like if you're doing a lot of zone 5 VO2 max work, you really can do sort of that polarized training with a lot of that zone 2 stuff and a lot of that top end zone 5, even zone 6 anaerobic type of stuff. So that's where I start a lot of people in terms of the years. We might do a couple weeks of zone 2 stuff to sort of get the body rolling. And then almost right away, I'm doing like polarized stuff in the early part of the year. I'm working with mostly like long distance triathletes, marathon, half marathon runners, and a lot of elite CrossFitters who get a lot of touches on this VO2 anaerobic work. So like I don't have to do tons and huge blocks of this, but there is an important part to develop this in the early phase across these specific disciplines. And then we can just go into maintenance mode while we do more of that zone 3, 4 work and start to build out total volume. So yeah, in that early phase, I might do a highly polarized model where it's zone 2 and a lot of zone 5 sort of top end work in that like 30-second up to call it 3-4 minute range. That's progressive. But then I'm going from there, and maybe the zone 2 stuff staying in the same part, and we're adding a lot more zone 3, zone 4 work, especially because that's where a lot of the triathletes and marathon runners are going to race in that part. So if you don't touch up on that stuff or do some specific blocks in there, then you're probably just not going to develop that stuff or teach your body to be efficient, with your system or muscularly at that stuff. So you need to be doing this zone 3, 4 stuff in N5 in certain specific phases. I think my biggest take home here is that you want to think of the training as a performance funnel. So like zone 2 is your foundational stuff. So great for building the physiology, the fat oxidation, being able to increase the volume safely. But then we are doing LT2, so zone 4 work to push both the LT1 and 2 to a higher percentage of VO2 max. The VO2 work raises the ceiling, and then our race specific work, usually for a lot of people in zone 3, zone 4 that I'm working with, really sharpens that performance and gets the body efficient to that part. So just don't want people to get bogged down too much in zone 2. It's an amazing health tool. It's a powerful tool. It allows us to do lots of work. And we know the people who do the most work year over year, there's a huge correlation to race results. I can almost plot it on the graph. My triathletes who do the most hours in the year are the ones who are probably having the fastest race results as well. Not probably, I know this. I've plotted it many times. So you need to do a lot of that zone 2 stuff, but they also have very, very specific phases of developing that zone 3, 4, and 5 stuff. Just remember zone 2 doesn't win races, and it helps build your engine, but it's only one small piece of the puzzle. So make sure you are mixing it up. And if you ever need advice on this stuff or want to work with myself who can identify some of your limiters and stuff like that, I'm always open to having a convo. You can hop on my Instagram and book a free 15-minute call if you ever want to chat about this stuff and see if maybe I'm the right fit for you and can help you out. But we'll see you next week, and best of luck with your training this week, and we'll see you soon.